Could you stop sharing your screen, actually?
Oh, yeah. And then
All
do
right.
that.
Yes. We're rolling. And I don't cut these. I don't edit them whatsoever. So that's what it is. Today's guest is Kirk. We'll get into that in a moment. Kirk Miller. We'll get into that and get started. But first, I just want to welcome anybody who is catching up with interviews, maybe for the first time. This has been a lot of fun. I was just telling Kirk before we got rolling that it's really just time to make logos like less scary for people. I just want to help people out and want to get into Logos users and how they use Logos. And so that's what this whole YouTube playlist is all about. I've been interviewing pastors and researchers and students and others, and just unpacking how they use the platform, how they use the application for their own studies. And today's guest is Kirk Miller, who's actually a staff member at Logos, so this could be fun. Not to put too much pressure on Kirk at the start here. Yeah, so Kirk Miller has also been in ministry in different capacities, and he's been a Logos user prior to jumping onto staff. And so I will just tee him up. Kirk, thanks for joining us today. Can you start by giving us some context, like a brief journey of how you got into Logos, and then the application, and then what led you to being on staff here, and what you do at Logos a bit?
Yeah, so I got Logos as part of a school partnership program, the school that I was going to in college. So it was halfway through my time at the school. They made the partnership. So 2010, I got Logos as part of my tuition. And I largely made use of it with original languages, as I had a minor in biblical Greek at the time, and I didn't make tons of use of Logos outside of that. But then when I went to seminary and just realized that books take up a lot of space, I made the decision to go all in on Logos, and I have not regretted it one bit. And so I've been using Logos and becoming more and more versant with it over the years, where I would consider myself pretty versant with it at this point, and served in a variety of contexts. Have about 15 years of pastoral ministry experience, served bivocationally as well, kind of like as a chaplain at a rescue mission, as well as a theological librarian for a time. So kind of have a wide variety of experiences. But now I serve as editor at Logos for digital content. So I manage our blog and basically get to be a theology nerd, helping produce theological and biblical content. So, yeah. I lost your audio, Jason.
How about now? Okay,
yep,
cool.
You're good now.
Yeah, I hit the mute button at some point, maybe not to not interrupt you, but like, I didn't know you were working in a library as a librarian at some point.
Yeah, I've done a lot of things. I've had a lot of jobs, so
that's pretty cool.
But pretty spanning the sort of very white collar to very like gritty context at the rescue mission, and so yeah.
Okay.
So yeah,
that's pretty cool. So as you start to share your screen, I'm sure we could do like a full hour on just like your background, all the stuff that you've been through and what you've learned. But we're going to jump into Logos. So as you share your screen there, there's actually, for anybody who's watching the replay, Kirk shared a mind map with me. So we could also dig in for like quite some time about what he wanted to cover in full, but we'll try to do 30 minutes or something like that. I know a couple of the areas that we wanted to cover was your own custom layout, which I think is what we're looking at here.
Yep.
And then some biblical languages, which is what you already mentioned. You've done a lot of work in biblical languages. And then another area, maybe just be like some new features that have hit Logos recently, and what you've enjoyed about some of those new features, maybe a little bit around subscription and what's happening with the recurring like updates that are being dropped by Logos. So yeah, so I think that that's a little bit of a roadmap, but we also agreed before we got rolling with recording that if we deviate, that's okay.
Yeah,
and we'll just see where this goes. So
yeah, so where do you want me to start?
I think with your layout, and it looks like you've got your scaling set up. I feel like
I'm ready to go.
I can see it just fine. I hope that others who watch the replay can see it that way too.
So
yeah, I'd say go with your layout.
It's normally not this big, so you have a little bit more room. So as you're watching this, assume that the text would be smaller, and so I have a little bit more space, but I have it blown up so you can see it. Yeah, so this is a custom layout. I have layouts I do for editing and a show that we're working on for Logos, but otherwise this is my personal layout, study layout, and this is what my Logos will open up to. And this is largely, most of the stuff I use Logos for is studying an actual passage of scripture. So I would preach regularly when I was pastoring, and so that's one of the main uses I had for Logos, and will still use Logos for. And so let me just kind of walk through some of the things I have here, and Jason, feel free to interrupt me and ask around.
Sure, absolutely.
I like to have what is, first of all, a custom guide. So as you know, Logos has various guides you can use, and I have some pinned here, but I like to go custom.
You just call it guide.
I just call it guide. Yeah, I used to call it I think I called it my guide for a while, but I kind of like it clean. You also notice I don't have a ton, like some users have tons of stuff pulled up. I'm kind of a minimalist, and it gives me a little bit of anxiety to have too much pulled up. So I like to keep a clean layout, and I will add things as needed. But this is kind of my basic layout. I have in my custom layout, I have commentaries that are queued up. And then a couple other of these, I forget what these are called. These sections, I think they're called, that I like to use is textual variants. This one, if I'm studying a passage, so I have Genesis 1 here, it'll show me any textual variant based on the textual commentary resources or some of these others that are in this passage, which is super nice. A lot of textual variants are not that significant, but sometimes they are. Important passages, grammars. This one is a hidden gem. Maybe it's hidden to some, maybe not, but this will pull up like it'll search your original language grammars, like your Greek and Hebrew grammars and such, and find sections in those grammars that relate to your passage. Because sometimes it's almost like they're not commentaries, but they sometimes provide really insightful commentary on a passage. Sometimes I like to see if there's a course that deals with, I'm just curious to know if I own a course that deals with the passage. I have a bunch of custom collections that I set up so I can search. This is kind of like it's kind of like the search function, but built into my guide. Ancient literature. This is an awesome one. This is going to find me, like if I want to see if the apostolic fathers or someone like that comments on a passage. Oftentimes when I'm using my commentaries, I stick mainly to modern commentaries, but I do like to attend to the older stuff. And this is a way to kind of quickly see if they're commenting on things. And then besides that, is this quite a bit? Journals, sermons, illustrations, interactives, if there's an interactive that deals with the passage. So that's what I use for custom layouts.
Interactives would be the toolbox item that's called media interactive. Yeah.
Yeah. So these, so some of these I don't find as useful as others, but there are a few in here that are really useful. And so I just like to, mainly I don't want to forget about those if there is something that's useful. So that's my custom guide. And then you'll notice a lot of what I have set up here is I just have I have a Bible over here. I have my text comparison, and the translations I use, as I'm thinking about, especially for preaching and teaching, I've been in contexts where the congregation that I'm speaking to oftentimes uses a variety of translations. And I want to be aware, not just for exegetical reasons, that sometimes if you're just in one translation, they might render something a certain way that's a translation decision, an interpretive decision, or a textual decision, that if I'm using other translations, I can be aware of those and I can dig into those issues myself. But I prefer using the ESV probably as a preaching Bible, but I love all the translations. I really do. And so I try to order these I put the King James on one side because it's kind of in a category of itself as a bit more older language. But otherwise, I try to put these from more what is sometimes called formal equivalent to more dynamic equivalent in an order. And so that way I can compare. This is the newest NASB, the 2020, the ESV, the NRSV updated edition, the CSB, the NET, the NIV, and the NLT. And I just want to highlight the NET if you're not familiar. This is the second edition. This is an awesome resource. Look at how many footnotes it has. In fact, here, one second. They sent me a physical copy of the NET. and you can just see how many notes that are on a page. Like that's just the biblical text, and everything else here is notes. And so this resource is just loaded with notes about the translation, but also textual issues, and it's almost like a commentary in itself. So I always check out the NAT. But
can you
really,
show one of the examples real quick?
Yeah.
Just, I mean, some folks might not be familiar whatsoever, and it'd be
Let's
nice to
see what would be a good
because
example.
it's grammatical. It's like textual more so than it is like Bible study notes. That's why
it is. So they have interpretive stuff, they have textual stuff, they have grammatical stuff. So anytime they want to be as transparent as possible is what their representatives would say about their translations. So or small plants. So that's nothing significant. Let me think of an example that would be good. So no, that's not a good one. Baptize here is what I'm thinking. Otherwise, why do people mean by baptized on the dead? No, I'm coming up short. Well, there are some notes in here.
I mean, you're in Genesis, and I thought of Yom, and that's why.
Yeah, that might be a good one. Let's do that.
That's what made me even think to ask the question. So, it was an idea. And God made.
It looks like
7.
Verse 7. No, it looks like they don't have anything on day. Well,
okay.
Take our word for it. There are some in here that have like significant comments that are like multi-paragraphs long. Anyways, it's a valuable resource. Sorry, I could have done better prep on that.
No, it's a random thought, but yeah, it is like a mix of interpretive and then like textual grammatical insights where they visit like the apparatus and items like that. So
yeah, so super useful. And then what I like to do is I like to have the information tool here. And this is, I mainly use this for original language study. So for instance, we talked about day. You'll notice in the very bottom of this panel, there is parsing information where it says noun, common, singular, all that. That's really helpful. But then in addition, if I want to study this word a little bit more, I can come over to the information tab. It has the information here. I can launch a word study if I want to go that route. But otherwise, oftentimes what I'll do is I have my resources prioritized so that my preferred lexicons, in this case, Hallett, or in the New Testament, BDAG, they're going to show up right here, and I can go right into Hallett. And then one of the beautiful things about having your lexicons in Hallett is, first of all, you don't have to thumb through and find the entry. But then the other thing is it under formatting? There's under one of these. Yeah, outline formatting. Normally, it would look like this, and it's just like paragraphs of text. I love that you can, for the lexicons, you can put them in outline format, so it's easier to scan and to use. So, and then one other thing I'll mention is I like to keep on my shortcuts tab. As I said, I was
going to ask about BNO. Is that Bible, New Testament, Old Testament, or something?
Yep, that's right. So
why is the First Testament second? That's what I was going to ask you.
Why is the First Testament second?
You have New Testament.
Oh, it's alphabetical. I can't change the order. Sorry.
All right.
That's a Logos thing. So I have all my like English translations that I'll use here, some that aren't in the textual in my text comparison. So all the different ones I might want to reference, but then my New Testament resources, and here these are mainly like language. So if I just want to pull up BDAG, or I'll use the NA28, which is the Greek New Testament that I use. Or in the Old Testament, there's a little bit more, and there's reason for that. There's the BHS, there's Hallett, which is the lexicon for the Old Testament I use. But then you'll notice I have some Septuagint resources as well, because the Old Testament is the Old Testament is translated into Greek, what we call the Septuagint, and oftentimes the New Testament relies on that. So when I'm in the New Testament, I will oftentimes be pulling up my Septuagint resources. And I'm a pretty big language person, but I was also a pastor, and pastors don't have all the time in the world. And so I will oftentimes use these interlinears, and I have them set up such that it will give me, I don't like, you can have these set up where it gives you all the parsing information underneath and like the Strong's number and things like that. I think I tend to do a simpler layout, but this is something that I find really valuable. It basically allows me to use the languages, which I think are really important to be using when you're studying scripture, if you can, if you know them. But to use them with a little bit of an aid, a little bit of a crutch, just so that it doesn't take me as long. And so I have these shortcut here so that anytime I want to look into the original language, I can easily access it. I mentioned how you can prioritize resources. So for instance, how Hallett will show up here, or if I'm in the New Testament, let's say I'm looking up Abraham, BDAG will show up for me. The way you can prioritize your resources, and this is super helpful, and don't get jealous, I have a ridiculous amount of books, is you just go over to these, the kebab menu, prioritize, and I order them kind of by type. So I have all my Bible translations first, but I will also do like surveys that I find valuable and introductions and theology books. Eventually I get to the bottom, and this is where I have all my commentaries. So I put my commentary series in the order that I find generally most valuable. It tends to be on a book by book basis, but this way, when I'm doing just any study in Logos, whether that's through the fact book or guides or the information tab, the resources that I tend to find most valuable are going to show up first. This matters a lot when it comes to my guide, because then say if I'm working on a passage in Matthew, the commentaries, they're going to be ordered in a way that is generally the most helpful for me. I can always keep going and keep going, but the ones that I tend to value the most are going to be towards the top. And while I'm here, let me mention kind of a sleeper resource. These exegetical summaries are super valuable. So when I am studying a passage, I almost always reference this resource, and they have them on every book of the Bible, I'm pretty sure. And so what they do, oops, I'm getting the, okay.
Wow, don't even see that all that often anymore.
I know. Yeah, it rarely happens for me. But what these do is they basically are a commentary on the commentaries. They summarize all the exegetical issues. So they don't tell you, like, it's not someone writing and telling you their interpretation and their take, but you'll see they have all these abbreviations for different translations or different commentaries, and they present the various issues. So first they start with lexical issues. They talk about how something is translated, or if there's a textual issue, like how a certain preposition is used. But then they also then get into exegetical questions, like what was the function and location of this tax office? And this is really helpful. Oftentimes it will raise questions that even commentaries don't, just because it's so granular. So I just want to throw out that resource as a suggested one.
That's solid. That's great.
Let me know if there's other places you want me to go.
I wanted to point out a few things.
Go for it.
Just real quick. One is, if folks find that the hover feature on information is overwhelming because you're bouncing around, like the whole time that you were running your mouse all over the place, it's updating all the time.
Yeah.
I like power lookup and information are two things that we've talked about in these interviews. And I think information, you can change it the same, right? You can. Is it hovering versus click?
Yep. You can, in program settings, you can make it hover or click. If it's hover and you hold down shift, it doesn't change.
Oh, okay.
Oh wait, it does. There is a way to do that where you hold something down and it doesn't change. Apparently it's not shift, but
I think you can do it through the kebab menu too, which I haven't heard many people call it the kebab menu. But the other thing was prioritization. Like if you hover over father right here, in Abraham was the father of Isaac. So these items under definition, those are the result of you prioritizing them in that way?
Yep.
Yeah. Is that right?
So those are prioritized resources.
It's actually prioritized above BDAG for you. So
I'm not sure why that shows up that way, because I wouldn't prioritize it that way. So
that's what I was wondering.
I actually look at that and I'm like, I wonder why it's doing that. But
okay.
Yeah, I mean, it is. I do like to look at that one as well. So
cool. So that was something else that jumped out at me. And then there was another item. Maybe I'll remember it as we're going back to organization. What is organization?
Okay,
You just
so
passed over that.
yeah, so this is something new for me. For the longest time, I would keep my study notes in a separate to be unnamed system. Um, and I found the Logos system of notes intimidating. And I wish I hadn't, because I've been digging into it more. And I wish I had been doing all my notes in there. So you'll see, like, I have some notes now. But this is kind of my notes. Notes legend is like my plan for starting to make notes in Logos. And so my goal is to start integrating my notes into Logos. So you'll notice here, this is a sermon that I was listening to at church and took notes on. And so I kind of have a color-coded system that I'm going to try to start using, where my Bible study notes are in one notebook. I subscribe to an ESV text change. That's these right here, where it tracks the ESV textual changes in the different ESV editions. Illustrations. This is note taking for when I'm like, I recently went to a lecture by N.T. Wright and took some notes. So anytime I'm listening to someone, note taking. Organization is just like notes to self about organization. Topic studies. If I'm studying like the Canaanite conquest, as I was doing recently, I'll keep notes in there. And so that's what that is. I just kind of I like to have the notes tab open so I can more easily access my notes. But you'll notice, like, I was recently working on 1 Corinthians 15, and I have a color-coded system. So I have, like, some notes are going to be dedicated towards the structure of the passage. So this green one is a structure. You can kind of see that here. I'm outlining the 1 Corinthians 15. But other notes will be like, I'll have a color for illustration, a color. I'm heavily influenced by Charles Simeon Trust and their approach to preaching. And so I have a color-coded system for sort of dealing with the context of the passage, dealing with the structural emphasis of the passage. And then I'll have color-coded notes for just application thoughts, reflection that way, illustrations, etc.
Great. Cool. Thanks.
Yeah.
I have another area to jump into if you have time.
Yeah, go for it.
So, did you want to cover anything further on original languages? Because you did show how, like, easy you can approach it, whether you're like someone who's deep into languages or you're just a pastor that's trying to, get familiar with the passage while you're preparing for a sermon. I didn't know if you had more.
Yeah, maybe two other tools I'll oftentimes use is, well, here's a good example. We're in 1 Corinthians 15. This is a tool that can be pretty nice, is it under, emphasize. If I turn emphasizing on, and then you can choose whether you want it to be the lemma or the root. But if I, like, a word, whenever you're looking for the emphasis of a passage, you want to note the structure, you want to note the repetition. Paul uses this word. He actually uses two different words, I believe, in this passage. So if I click on it, if I go to formatting and emphasize, that means I can click on a word, and then the other times it occurs, this must be one of the rare word that he uses. Let me try find the other. Yeah. So here it automatically then shows me the other places that it occurs. And that can be really useful. So that would be another tool that I use. Another really helpful instance, I was just talking with a friend about this the other day, about the use of vengeance in Romans 12 and 13. Where does that occur? Oh yeah, vengeance. And I have it set to the root. And you'll notice Paul says, never avenge yourself. But then afterwards, vengeance is mine, says the Lord. So here he's saying, we don't take vengeance for ourselves because we can trust that God himself will take vengeance. He will repay. But notice by clicking that, I also see that, wait, in Romans 13, the servant of the Lord, which is the state, these governing authorities, they are a servant as an avenger. And now avenger is different than vengeance. And we might not realize that these are all related in the Greek. But I see that I'm not to take vengeance because God takes vengeance. But one of the ways, apparently, that God takes vengeance is through this is the word deacon here, his deacon, his servant, which is the state who takes vengeance on his behalf and wields the sword, who carries out God's wrath on the wrongdoer. So that's another tool that I find helpful, is just looking for repetition. Or, of course, you can just right click, and from here, you can open up a Bible search and look up every single use of a word. I do that quite frequently just to look up repetition, because repetition is so important. Or if I just want to know how a word, well, like what a word means, I want to see how it's being used in other contexts. Those are probably some of the main original language tools that I'll use.
That's great. Emphasize. And then what's under emphasize that you just
You can
enable
do,
it?
yeah, I mainly do either lemma or root, or I do both. Like here I have both.
Oh,
Root
and
will
of
sometimes
course.
get you way more results than you want.
Hmm.
So you just kind of have to play around and see.
That's great. Okay. And then can you close with any new features?
Yeah.
Especially in like the topical world, instead of like passage study, which is what you've been focusing on.
Yeah. So if I
Huge.
want to study, I normally do passages, but if I want to study a topic, like oftentimes I'll just be like, I'll come across something in Bible reading and I'll be like, who on earth is, that people? Who are the Moabites or whatever? A helpful tool for this is Factbook, of course. And so I can easily, find out who the Moabites are. And I love how we have sort of revamped the fact book. There's so many new elements. We can group things. Even just the layout looks a lot nicer. So I love the layout. You have the different what do we call these? The different lenses. So I'll use Factbook. I oftentimes don't use that in deep study because I prefer the guide, but I will use Factbook for kind of quick answers to things, maybe find some key passages on something. But by far my favorite new tool is the new Smart Search. And so I will, instead of Googling things, you can run your searches right in the Logos. And let's say like here's the beautiful thing about it is it's not like you couldn't search Logos before. But with the new AI that's integrated, you don't have to, it's far easier to use. You can just type in normal English and it will pull results for you. So if I want to say like, how does Paul use flesh or the word flesh in Romans, and I search that, it's going to search my whole library and it will give me this synopsis. So if I just want a quick answer, like if I'm just looking for a quick answer to something, I can go to the synopsis. But if I'm looking to dig deeper, it's going to cite resources for me. So it's not just pulling random information and I don't know where it's from. Like if I use ChatGPT, here it's giving me the exact resources where it's getting its information from, and I can dive into those things myself. Also, and it includes books that aren't even in my library. And so I'm even getting a little bit of information for things I haven't paid for in that sense. But also if I want to dive into something, so Paul and the Faithfulness of God by N.T. Wright, if I'm like, this looks interesting, but I'm not sure if I want to spend all my time on it, I can click summarize. And this isn't meant, we're not trying to do, like Logos isn't integrating these things so that you don't have to do any work. It's helping you know where to invest your work. And so I can do a summarize and kind of get a sense here. Or even if I'm studying the commentaries and I want to know, like, I don't want to spend I've already read 3 commentaries and I don't know if I want to spend all my time reading Leon Morris. I can open it up in here and go to summarize there as well and kind of see, is this commentary worth reading? What kind of take does he have? Does he say something that's maybe a little bit different than I've read so far? So those are some of my favorite tools. Is a lot of the new AI stuff with searching and summary and all that.
Yeah. Can I check something real quick that I hadn't seen before? And I stay right where you are. If you scroll down.
Yep.
I haven't seen Smart Search pulls the cloud, like resources that are not installed locally.
Yeah, so I have too many books that I don't download them all, but it searches all my, like, these are books that I own that I haven't downloaded, and so it will search those as well, and then I can download it if I want to go deeper.
That's cool. I didn't realize that, because I don't think that the old search, I don't think that, I have to look into this to confirm, but I don't think that the search that was used previously would search your non-downloaded resources. I think that you have to have them downloaded for it to do that search. So
Hmm.
that's something I want to check on, because that's a big help right there too.
Yeah, if that was the case, then I feel compelled to download all my resources, because that's one of the valuable things about, like, sometimes people, people love physical books. I love physical books, but I am glad that I have built my library in Logos, and one of the reasons is, well, it's like the convenience. I also think the dynamic pricing makes it very affordable to build a large library. But then with this new search feature, this means that it is able to search all my books that much more easily. And of course, you can add your print library now, so that overcomes that hurdle. But I can just jump right into a book then this way. And so the Smart Search, the larger your library, the more powerful Logos becomes, and this specific tool becomes.
Cool. Thanks, Kirk.
Yeah.
Okay, I know that there are a few places that you publish content, so I wanted to also give folks opportunity to follow along, basically. So I know there's logos.com/grow, and then
that's our blog that I manage.
Could folks follow along?
So be sure to subscribe to our Logos blog, and we're always publishing stuff by really top thinkers and scholars. I also have a personal blog where I just kind of dump things that I do, kirkmillerblog.com. You can follow me on Facebook. What is it? Facebook.com/KirkMillerblog, and Twitter. If you search Kirk Miller, you'll find me.
X.
Or X. Sorry, I still say Twitter. And then Blue Sky, I guess, is a thing now. So I don't know. Yeah. And
Are you not on Threads?
I'm not. I kind of have a love-hate relationship with social media, where I don't like to create new accounts for things. So
and you're about to say we're on.
We're about to launch I shouldn't say about to. We will be launching a podcast. I will be hosting a podcast with Logos soon. So I'm not going to say too much about it, but you can follow me there once that launches. So keep your ear to the ground about that information.
I was wondering where you're going to go with that, because it's a podcast, so you couldn't say like keep your eyes peeled.
Yeah, I wasn't sure I was going to say either. Well, it's a podcast. It's a show. It's a show.'ll be able to find it.
Oh, it's a video podcast.
It'll be video podcast. So,
anyway.
All
right, man. Thanks, Kirk. This has been really insightful. It's been fun. I didn't know how you use Logos, so it was like, I wonder where he's going to go with this.
This is only scratching the surface, man. There's so much.
The only thing I have a problem with is that it's not alphabetical. Like, it's not canonical over on the far left side. I think that you need to fix the O and the N somehow. I don't know what to say. I just can't. I can't.
I know.
I won't be able to sleep until it's fixed.
I know that does kind of bug me a little bit, that the New Testament is before the Old Testament.
Okay.
But maybe I could call it the Hebrew Bible. But then the problem is it's not Hebrew for the LXX. So
yeah. Okay. Well, I'm gonna be like scratching my.
Well, when someone in the comments can offer a solution.
All right, Kirk. Thanks.
All right.
I really appreciate your time.
Yep. See you, man.